The main points I kind of want to talk about, and we can bring up anything else that comes up naturally as we just talk, but like your favorites, kind of best backgrounds that you think suit certain classes, best suited for like the kind of character you want to play, like a rough and tumble sort of character, like what's a good background. Homebrewing, because of course you can create your own background too. Hi everybody, welcome to this episode of the podcast. I have John and Evan here, and we're going to talk about backgrounds and backstories and how to tie those into your characters and what you might find interesting, or things that at least we find interesting, and hopefully you guys will find them interesting too. Alright, so we're going to start with the player's handbook. So if everybody wants to open your textbooks to page number, whatever it is, I don't know, I've got it on D&D Beyond, guys, so that's the thing. We're just D&D Beyonding it. So essentially, the first thing I want to talk about is...
page 127.
There you go, 127. Thank you, John. He is the resident book number guy. So, when you're coming up with a character, you want to come up with not just like their appearance and their mannerisms and those sorts of things, but also you kind of want to have a little bit of a story about where they started, at least in your own mind, whether or not you decide to share where you got the idea from. That's entirely up to you, because sometimes you want to plagiarize things, but you don't want to tell anybody and you want people to figure it out, because it's fun to watch people go like, hey, wait a minute, your character's just like freaking Iron Man. And you're like, haha, you get it. So
actually playing Tony Stark.
Yeah, exactly. So that can happen. But we're looking through at least the player's handbook to begin with. So you want to decide stuff like your height and weight and your physical appearances. But you don't always have to decide everything from the get-go. You might not have an idea for eye color. You might be like, I want them to have eyes that are kind of cool, but I'm not really sure what color I want to make it yet. So you just kind of don't have to worry about that, or even, you know, deciding what their gender is and stuff like that. That is completely inconsequential for the most part until you start interacting with the other characters and that sort of stuff, as well as alignment. I kind of feel like alignment is one of those things that you can skip over unless you have a very clear cut idea of how your character is going to act already before role playing them. Like alignment is an okay place to start if you want to try and be like, oh, I think they're chaotic good, so they're going to be a little bit crazy, but they're mostly good-hearted and blah blah blah. But honestly, I feel like alignment comes after you've played the character for a few sessions and you start to get more used to how you think they act. Then you can kind of be like, oh yeah, my character is basically lawful good, or like, they're probably chaotic good because they're a little bit out there, but, or you might even be like, they're pretty much neutral. They don't really give a shit too much either way, but. Yeah.
I think it depends on how you look at alignment for that character.
Yeah, it does.
It does. For me, I don't see chaotic as necessarily being out there and crazy, and it annoys me a bit when people play their characters crazy.
It can just be like
chaotic is more
an extreme rather than a.
I think it's more freedom based. I think neutral characters don't care one way or the other. Lawful characters believe in rules. They like the setup of a society.
Chaotic is kind of just like...
Chaotic characters are more individualistic. So I suppose it's real world thing. It's like looking at America compared to, I was going to say Australia, but maybe even England, or Japan. Whereas they're very set up to be, but Australia, Japan, England, we seem to be set up as a society, and we do things together as a society, and that's what a lawful character's like. Whereas a chaotic one's more like Americans who believe in individual freedoms.
Yeah, that's true.
Individual freedom is more important. So that's what, like in D&D, if you're playing a chaotic good ranger, you would see one person's individual freedom more important than five people's.
Like,
group.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. So if you do that, then it can become important.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, we've still got other things. We got languages. So, of course, you want to have... I mean, I think every race, no matter what you are, starts with common. And everybody speaks common because it is common. at least from a character perspective. There are a lot of monsters that don't speak common, of course, but then you've got, like Dwarvish, Elvish, Giant, Gnomish, Goblin, Halfling, Orc, that are the standard languages, and then you've also got Abyssal, Celestial, Draconic, Deep Speech, Infernal, Primordial, Sylvan, and Undercommon, that are the exotic languages. And essentially tying in either another standard language would generally give your character a theme of, like, they've lived in a society that has various groups of these races that mingle together quite often, so that's the reason that they learn this language. Or maybe one of their parents is from, said racial background. And then also the exotic languages, you could tie that deeply into something even more sort of perhaps secretive or sinister, or just more interesting that's happened in their background. If they're a tiefling, they might speak Infernal and whatever. But also if they are perhaps if they're for a warlock, for example, you might have them speaking Sylvan if they have taken the Archfey as their patron, stuff like that. There's lots of different things, and like druids and stuff like that, depending on the class too. Obviously, there's going to be some things that that would also contribute to which exotic language you might pick as well, if you have the opportunity to. It's kind of funny, like sometimes there's DMs that say like you can't start with any of the exotic languages unless you have a specific thing from your background or a part of your backstory that allows you to have those, because they are specifically exotic. And if you've got like a choice of X, Y, like how many languages you can take as a starting, like from your background or from a feat or something that you might take that gives you more languages, you can't choose the exotic ones. You can only choose the standard ones. But I say pooey to that. I think having exotic languages is awesome, so everybody can have whatever they want.
I think
as long as it fits.
Yeah, I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Is it also depends a bit on the campaign and the campaign setting.
It does. That's true.
Yeah, because originally I think Common was actually meant to be like a trade language.
Okay.
And it just happened to be the only language that humans spoke was the trade language. So it became kind of a language that everybody has. But it would be interesting to play in
a campaign where Common wasn't the common language.
Well, if you swap Common out for human.
Yeah, that's true.
And unless the humans are absolutely dominant, it might mean that you can meet a dwarf that doesn't speak
human. Yeah.
Human.
Yeah.
But it's like in the real world, we use English a lot.
Yeah.
As kind of a
common
standardized common language. It's just that human has become that common language in the D&D world. But what happens if you like my campaign setting where there is an Asia and there's an America, but the Asians don't actually speak the same common.
Yeah. Well,
so if you go there, you've actually got to learn another language.
Yeah. There's a similar thing like that in a couple of games that I've seen on Twitch and on YouTube as well, where like they have different regions of people, and the common for that area is a different version of common for the other areas of the world. So like you go there and they're speaking the common language that's there, but it's not the same common language that you have, so you can't actually understand it. It is literally a different language. And
tying it back into the backgrounds, there is some backgrounds where you don't actually come from the local region.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you're a player that's really getting into your character, you say, hang on, I'm playing an elf that's never left the elven homelands.
Yeah, they're not going to know.
So you might want to swap out your common language for like Sylvan or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So we got personal characteristics such as ideals, flaws, and bonds, and personality traits. All those things are things you can sort of take an idea from the background that you look at, because there are like a list of them there, or you can come up with your own, because like realistically these are things that that are pretty like they're pretty ingrained to your character specifically, not ingrained to just the background in particular. So like even if you are playing a folk hero, they still might have the personality trait of they don't trust anyone and they're an asshole and whatever, and that doesn't make them any less of a folk hero. It's just not one of the options on the folk hero little table thing. It doesn't really matter. Those are there as guidelines to help you try and get a better idea of how you might want to role play your character in terms of how they act in certain situations. So the flaw could be just like as simple as, you know, the character's very forgetful or something like that. Or it could be extremely complex. Like they could have like some kind of almost neurotic kind of thing they have going on as their flaw. Like, you know, every time they walk into a room, they have to touch a table, and if there's no table in there, they have to rest against the door. Like, it could be, you know, it doesn't sound like a flaw, but if you're forced to do it every single time you enter a room, it's gonna become a flaw. And if you want to like play into that flaw, especially, it will make situations far more interesting for your character than would normally be if you just kind of have it there and remember it when you choose to, and not so much when you don't, which is fine too, because honestly, it can be difficult to remember absolutely everything that you want to do with your character, especially in the spur of the moment when something happens that forces you to act in a way, and you have to quickly answer, or you quickly want to do something, and then you forget that you have this flaw that lets you, that kind of forces you to do something. Yep. And you might just forget about it in that instance. Yeah. And the DM is highly likely not going to remember everybody's stuff either. So like, no. you're kind of in charge of that, how much you want to play on that, and how much you want to really put that in there as well. But
yeah. But there's a little bit of realism in that as well. Like if your character's being chased down the hall by a monster and you run into a room, you might just forget to touch the table on the way through because you know you're more worried about being eaten by the werewolf.
Yeah, you very might do. Or it might be detrimental in that sense too. Like, it might be very detrimental. Like, you run through the room and you're on the opposite side of the room, but you have to run across the other side of the room, touch the table, and then continue on down the hall. Like, you might,
or you run through the room, realize you've forgotten, have to go back and touch it twice.
Yeah, exactly. And then,
despite the fact that there's a monster in the way,
and then all of a sudden you're in combat with a werewolf that you were trying to run away from.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh shit, god damn it, why did he have to touch the table? And then the whole party's there, and it becomes a thing. It's actually it creates some very memorable moments by the sounds of things. So yeah, we got proficiencies and stuff as well that you get from background. So this is one thing that I find extremely helpful is for when you're creating a character is you've chosen your class and your race and your background or whatever. When you're actually creating your character, do the background proficiencies before you do your class ones, because that way you can choose ones from your class that you don't get from your background, so that you don't double up and accidentally like pick the same one twice, because you don't get expertise or anything for just picking the same one twice. That's not how it works. Yeah. Like you get expertise with some classes, but not from just getting proficiencies.
I think backgrounds is the one where the rule comes out that if you like, say you're an archite and you pick religion, but you've already picked it as a cleric, well, you get to swap to another proficiency. Yeah. Then that's what the only place the rules are meant for.
Yeah. And I think you have to swap it from proficiency that's available to your class, right?
Really, no.
No, you can just swap it for anything?
You can just swap it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's got to be a proficiency. Each background gives the character proficiency in 2 skills. In addition, if the character will gain the same proficiency from 2 different sources, he or she can choose a different proficiency of the same kind instead. So if it's a tool proficiency,
skill or
you
tool.
Pick a
different tool.
You can pick another tool proficiency, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one you'd get from your class.
That seems really weird.
Yeah. It's probably not what they meant.
No, yeah. It seems like they mean you can pick another one from from the list of skills that you could pick from, kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard for that to see how that would ever actually...
Well, I guess if you got, say if you got, like for tools, if you got like a GAMP, if you took like the Charlatan background or whatever, or even the, what's the other one, like the soldier or something, where you get like a game set. and then you got a game set from whatever your class was as well. Like maybe it would be like, oh, you can be proficient at playing cards and you can be proficient at the dice as well, like at the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or even
Generally,
for tools. For tools,
generally
it could
they
be
give
like,
you a choice.
Yeah. For tools, it could be
The only
carpentry and whatever else. Yeah.
The only one I'd really see that I'd want to do it, like maybe if you had two, like you said, dice sets, you might want to change it for something different.
Yeah.
But if you're an entertainer bard, it's a great background to have the entertainer if you're a bard, but you don't really need that fourth musical instrument.
No, you kind of don't.
Yeah.
You don't really need another musical instrument. I mean, it could be good to be proficient in it, but like, you're probably not going to be carrying that many musical instruments on you necessarily.
Conan is.
Yeah, Conan. Well, Conan also went and bought them though. This is like, for when you're starting out, generally you're only going to have one, right? Oh, two, I guess. One is an entertainer, one is a bard, so you'd have two, right?
Yeah.
And as a bard, you already start proficient with like 3. So, I mean, it is a background though. So essentially, you could say that as an entertainer, you were proficient in that whatever you choose your proficiency for from the entertainer background before you became a bard. So you're more proficient, I suppose, even though that doesn't really translate into the game mechanics at all. But you're more proficient at the specific musical instrument that you chose as an entertainer than you were when you became a bard and you became proficient with the flute or the whatever it ends up being.
I mean, this is somewhere where the background can start affecting the way you play your character. Because if you're a bard with the entertainer background and your musical instrument was lute, you could say, well, even though all the rolls are exactly the same no matter what musical instrument I use, it makes no practical difference. But lute is my favourite because that's the one I've been doing the longest.
Exactly.
Your character considers himself best at lute.
Yeah. And if your DM is generous or something, perhaps they might give you a bonus to the lute that you play, or they might give you advantage. For example, if on a whatever a performance check when you're using your lute because you're more proficient at it or something, they might just put it that way. I just did think of something interesting that you could do for choosing, like you said, like choosing a background and then essentially, like if you chose the same skill twice, you could give expertise, I suppose, because it's essentially, instead of taking another skill, you just want to be better at this one. You could give expertise for that if it was for if you really wanted to.
I get that, but my issue with that is that you're taking away from the bard and the rogue class.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. It's like other classes do get like expertise, and that is kind of the reason. Well, it's not all the reason, but it's part of the reason you have those characters too, because they are skill monkeys. Yeah. So you want to have those characters that are good at all the skills.
And you don't want to be outshone by.
No, but I think like in the instance, say you take a cleric and you're an acolyte, and you really want to be really good at religion. It's like I think it might be okay if you've got expertise in religion as a cleric. Kind of makes sense. But it also and also in all honesty, like clerics get 4 skills the entire game essentially. So like having them be really good at religion is not super detrimental to like the bard or the rogue, who are going to be good at practically everything else.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, but the other thing is there is actually a way for cleric to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can always take
be a knowledge cleric.
Yeah, you can always take a certain subclass. Yeah.
In general, if you want to do something like that, there's ways to do it. Like if you're a cleric of knowledge, like Conan, he got an additional 2 languages. Yep. And he got 2 extra skills.
Yeah.
Your proficiency is double.
This is Conan the Bard in our Theros game, guys, not Conan the Barbarian, because that could get confusing. Yes, Conan is so knowledgeable.
Conan the Librarian.
Yes. I could just imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But you get effectively you you get to double your proficiency with that. You get expertise
Yep.
with the 2 skills you pick from that as well, which is why, as well, Conan the Librarian actually, as a law, bard, knowledge cleric, has expertise in every intelligence-based
skill
proficiency.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. He knows everything.
It's pretty nuts. He does. He's very knowledgeable, but he is very old, which makes sense that he has had enough time to study, and he has been in the library in Meletis, the major city in Theros, for like what, 20 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So like, and he's working at the library, so it makes sense that he knows, you know, a lot.
Yeah.
Done a lot of research.
That's the thing. That's the thing. The thing with, I think, with backgrounds is your background is important to how your character acts when you start the game.
Yes.
And a bit how he acts when he's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But you also want to make sure it's not the most important part of your character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what's going on now that's the important thing.
Yes.
Generally.
Those things that you did in the past are there to prop you up and help you through the adventure that you're traveling through.
Yeah.
Not to kind of like supersede what you're actually doing. Yeah.
Because when you read all the best, because I mean, role playing is group storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting together, we're telling a story about the characters, and as players, retell the part of the story that the main character is in. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah.
But whenever you read a book or see a movie, the good ones are all about the fact that the characters change in some way in the story.
Yeah.
The background kind of says, okay, this is how your character starts. And the fun part of the storyteller is then, well, how much of that changes as you go
through the story, yeah. So it's like, does your character become stronger? Do they become wiser? Do they kind of get a sense of closure with something that happened in their life? Like all these different things that can happen within the story.
Yeah. And I mean, and that can always happen. Like I remember reading a story. I think it was Gary Gygax might have been telling.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the early characters, he started playing and he was really cocky.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fighter. He had all the confidence going, all that stuff that really makes sense.
Yeah.
And then he got the crap kicked out of him, like the first 3 fights that he was in, or 2 fights. And he stopped being cocky. He started being more
kind of like careful, I suppose.
Careful, and I think I kind of did the same when I was playing Conan, because he had the background that he used to be a fighter and now he's not.
Yeah.
So he would jump in and go straight back to when I first started playing, he'd go straight back into fighter mode and he'd jump right in and try and protect everybody else.
But it didn't work out so well.
And it didn't work out so well. I got the crap kicked out of me for doing it. So Conan changed, and he doesn't
actually realized he was not as dexterous as he used to be.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I'm 90 years old now. I'm just not fast enough to do that.
Yeah. All right. So I've got the list here on the sidebar. We have Acolyte, Charlatan, Criminal, Entertainer, Folk Hero, Guild Artisan, Hermit, Noble, Outlander, Sage, Sailor, Soldier, Urchin. That's just from the Player's Handbook. Then over in Acquisitions Incorporated, there is also Celebrity, Adventurers, Scion, Failed Merchant, Gambler, Plaintiff, Rival Intern. Then in Theros, there is the Athlete, plus there's also some other background stuff in Theros that's kind of specific to Theros, but it's more about having like a sort of a superpower to start with. And then the backgrounds in Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, there is City Watch, Clan Crafter, Cloistered Scholar, Courtier, Faction Agent, Far Traveler, Inheritor, Knight of the Order, Mercenary, Veteran, Urban Bounty Hunter, Uthgard, Tribe Member, Water Davian, Noble, and then there is, in the backgrounds from Van Richten's, there is the Haunted One and an Investigator. So there are a lot of different books with a lot of different backgrounds. And there's also some other stuff like the This Is Your Life chapter in Xanathar's Guide that has a good kind of place to start you off with how you how your character might have come to be on or ready to be on an adventure, as well as like their parents and their birthplace and all that sort of stuff that helps you kind of like sort of, I guess, concrete your background a little bit more if you kind of need to think about it or want to think about it, or even if you just want to roll, because they're all random tables, so you could come up with something crazy that you could then think of how those things tie together, rather than like specifically choosing every single one to an idea that you already have, which is perfectly fine. You could always just roll and then try and tie all those threads together. It's something that I kind of do a little bit with some of the NPCs that I've come up with for the Thurs game that we're playing. It's like, okay, this person is this and this person is this, but why are they there and why are they there? And just rolling randomly to see like what race and class they were, and then going like, okay, well, let's just try and put these things together and see how it goes. I don't really have to come up with too much of a backstory from them for most of the NPCs. Sometimes I just make it up on the fly because it's easier, because they don't necessarily need to know who their grandfather's name was until it gets asked of them for some weird reason. But I also kind of like, especially because the Thurs game is set in the Thurs world, which is not a homebrew setting, it is a D&D setting, but the story itself is all homebrew. So I really like the idea of having the players' backgrounds and backstories involved in the story, because it gives that little bit more sense of depth to the story, rather than just there's something attacking the something, go and stop it. That's like, cool, okay, we'll go and stop it, because, you know, that's kind of where the adventure is, and we don't want the world to end, so we kill the bad guy, and yay, we won, but why were we doing it? And I find that why were we doing it, other than the fact of out of the goodness of our hearts, having them having to rescue a family member, or saving a long-lost friend, or perhaps a piece of someone's soul was taken away from them by the creature and they were trying to get it back, or I don't know, some bad guys stole all their money and magic items and they're trying to get them all back again because they're theirs and they want them. So, there's always a reason. You always got to give the characters specifically a reason, rather than just that's what the characters are supposed to do because they're the players in the game. It's give the characters a specific reason to also do these things. So having the backgrounds tied into that, at least even loosely, is a really good way to get all of the players a little bit more invested in how the story might go. So, like, I'm just going to give a quick example, but one of my favorite backgrounds is the soldier background. I like it a lot because, well, you get a gaming set, which I think is fun, because it's always fun to have downtime where you can just be like, hey guys, let's play a game of cards. And then, you know, you're really good at it because you got proficiency with it, and you might win money off your other players, which is always fun. And then you've got land vehicles, which is really handy because a lot of the time when you're starting out at early levels, you are trying to get from point A to point B, and that is a big part of the adventure. Traveling across land, running into, you know, groups of kobolds and groups of goblins and things that are trying to run you off the road when you're on a cart. If you've got land vehicles, you can ride that cart really well. You also have things like your Insignia Rank can be super helpful when you're getting into a new city, a new town. You can always hold that rank of Insignia, and if you're a soldier in a prominent army from around whatever region you're in, you're probably going to have that that sort of little, at least very little, sort of like token of respect almost from the get-go. If you kind of like, you know, hey guys, come on, I know what's up, like I've been in the military, I'm not gonna, like, you know, do anything stupid, I'm just here to help out, blah blah blah. It kind of gives you a little bit more of a token of respect. But you also have the option for this one, I feel like, to have and this kind of goes to another homebrew rule, which is the I know a guy rule. It's like if you ever get stuck and you're in a situation with a story and you guys don't know what's going on, or you need something and you don't have access to it, I like having the idea of this homebrew rule where you can be like, oh, I know a guy, and it'll come from your background, and it'll be someone that you knew from your past that can help you in some way, that the DM then has to kind of try and like slot that person in. But it's essentially like a we need a bit of help DM card in trying to figure out what to do here. But I feel like the military rank one has that really, really well, because say you were part of the cavalry, you've got all your cavalry buddies. Or say you're even part of the infantry, you've probably got a lot of infantry buddies if any of them survived. You've also got things like if you were an officer, you can call on your subordinates maybe that you had back in the military that like highly respected you, that you can get help from. The other thing I find with the military background too is like, as a story path, there are a lot of those options of like ghosts from the past coming back to haunt you kind of thing for a story. Like, I thought that guy died, or oh my god, this guy was alive the whole time. He wasn't the bad guy. This guy was the bad guy. Like, you know, there's all these little options that you can have for stories for the soldier background, which is why I kind of like it. But but in fairness, they're all sort of like that. Yeah. Like every one of the backgrounds, you can have like a character that existed that was your friend or your rival or whatever it was that comes back. And that's the reason that the story is going to be about you for the next story arc or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I like about the soldier background is the specialties are so different.
They are.
That you can have so many different. Like, I mean, I think I did up 2 characters within a week of each other. And one was a soldier. He was just like you said, he was infantry. But the other one was a rogue.
Okay.
Who took the soldier background, and he was a scout. I think I wanted him to be a scout. He took the scout subclass. But being a scout is so different to being an infantry.
Oh yeah.
It also depends on what kind of soldier you are. Are you in a nation's army? What kind of army is it? You know?
Yeah. There are a lot of sort of differences between them all. Yeah. It's I think it's kind of similar in that sense, where you have all these different like sort of sub like ideas of how the background interacts with your character for stuff like the charlatan as well.
I think
Sage and Scholar work the same way too.
Yeah, Sage
and Scholar. There's so many different versions of that you can do.
Yeah.
Guild Artisan.
Yeah, Guild Artisan's another humongous one.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'd like to flip back and show it. This goes back to what you were talking before about expertise.
Yeah.
What the soldier doesn't give you, what's part of the class.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any weapon proficiencies, even though you're a soldier.
Yep.
So if you're a wizard in the soldier, you've still got no weapon proficiencies, no armor proficiency, other than quarterstaff.
Yep.
You know, and I think that's probably gets back to what I was saying about the expertise.
Yeah.
It's, if you want to do that, if you want to be a character with the expertise, then play one of the classes that get expertise.
Yeah.
And tie that to your background.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's how you have to do it. Sometimes if you have an idea of a background, you've got to tie the character to the background.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like, because I knew when I made up Conan the Librarian, one of my aims was I wanted every proficiency.
Yeah.
That's why he's a law bard. That's why he took one level of cleric. I was actually, when I started in thinking about being a wizard as well.
Yeah.
But the game changed that.
Yeah, the game sort of changed a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I changed my idea of where Conan wanted to go. He's quite happy staying as a bard now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but
yeah, Guild Artisan's a good one for that in terms of like the kind of differentiation between the backgrounds, even though they're kind of housed in the same thing. It's like, you might be a cook, or you might be a shipwright, or you might be a friggin' weaver. Like there are so many different things that you can. And I feel like the guild business one is a good one to show off the this is your life part of the Xanathar's book as well, because like essentially in D&D it's very much family business orientated, right? As far as like a background goes. If your dad was a cobbler, you're probably going to become a cobbler. If your dad was a smith, or if your family was a smith, you're probably going to become a smith, right? So like that's a good way to tie in, like maybe you choose your background and you go, I want to be a guild artisan. And you're like, what could I be? I'm going to be a cartographer. And it's like, okay, if you're a cartographer, then this is your life section. You can choose options from that, or think of options from that then support that. And be like, oh yeah, my father traveled around a lot too. And then just off the top of my head, you're a cartographer because your dad was a cartographer. Your dad got lost creating a map for some unexplored island, and he's missing, and he's been missing for 20 years, but he's not dead because you get a letter from him every year for some reason that's just like that's like a cipher. It's like you can't decode it. So you're either off on an adventure to decipher the code, or find where your father went, or there could be maybe you did decipher the code and he's talking about a hidden treasure and you're trying to find where the treasure is, and like there's tons of options just from that simple thing right there already. So
you know what, from a game point of view, because you've got Sword Coast open as well, right?
Yep.
If you compare guild member to clan crafter, which is like the second background in that, they're actually the same background. They
are basically the same, yeah.
That's a good difference to if you look at that kind of thing, it's a good difference to how to homebrew what you want.
Yes.
Because effectively, I don't think there's much difference between the two of them. Let's see.
History instead of
insight and persuasion. Insight and persuasion is what you get as a guild artisan.
You get history and insight.
Insight as a crafter. So you get history instead of persuasion.
Yeah,
which makes sense for dwarves. You get a tool proficiency with either of them.
You get dwarvish.
You get a language, but it's kind of, if you're not a dwarf, has to be dwarvish.
And then if you get guild artisan, you can choose the language anyway.
Yeah. So like I said,
equipment.
Yeah. I think the only difference is you get the makers. You get the chisel with your mark on it, so you can put your mark on it. But they're kind of superficial differences.
Yeah, they are. They're not.
And you get respect to the stout folk as a feature. The features, which can be very much, actually, don't underestimate how much the feature
matters to your background as well. Extremely handy.
Guild membership is very different to respect to the stout folk.
Yeah.
I mean, for starters, you don't have to pay guild fees.
You have to pay guild fees, yeah.
It's about the only time that appears, isn't it? That having an ongoing fee.
Pretty much. I mean, if you're really into forcing the characters to pay for their lifestyle every day, then yes, you can do that. Like a silver for a modest life. What is it? Like a gold for a pretty,
I don't know,
a pretty good lifestyle, whatever it was.
It's.
I think it's like 5 silvers is
like a standard,
comfortable.
Yeah. You can live
on
like 2 silver for a day.
Yeah. I think I like the concept that you pay if you have to, you pay that ongoing thing. But what it does is replaces as well, or fixes up your equipment that you have.
Yeah.
Like if you're an archer, it stops you having to go and buy arrows every time. You just consider that, okay, you took 2 months off, and if you're really poor and you're doing the 1 copper piece, moving on the street kind of thing, you've fixed your arrows.
Yeah.
If you're really rich, you've just wandered through and go, oh, just give me those.
Plus, 5 gold per month for a guild membership is not a lot for an adventurer at all.
No.
It's like,
and it's probably not a hell of a lot for someone who owns a business.
No, exactly.
You know,
I like the idea now of having a character that has like a furniture shop, and they're just like, yeah, I'm going out to find wood, but really they're going on adventures, and they just leave their apprentice there to like run the shop while they're gone.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that could tie into stories as well. Like they get back, the assistant's missing, the shop's thrown to shit, or like they get back and the assistant's like, someone's been looking for you for like the last 2 weeks. Where have you been? And you're like, oh, I was out getting wood. And they're like, this person looks shifty as fuck. And then you're like, okay, what do they look like? And then it's like you've got someone stalking you, and that's a whole storyline.
Because we've talked about so far. We've talked about how the background kind of suits your character.
Yeah.
And then it's also fun to sometimes to have a background that doesn't suit the character.
Doesn't suit the class so
personality, or like doesn't suit his personality. Like, this is actually your background. What if your father was a guild member and he was a furniture maker?
Yeah.
And he made you become a furniture maker.
Yeah.
You live in Japan, you understand the type.
Yeah.
And you've never wanted to be, so that's why you wander off and do adventures all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You're stuck with this friggin' business. It's your family business. Your widowed mother still lives off the profit you make on this family business. You can't give it up.
Yeah.
But dear God, I'm a bard now, and I just want to go and sing to people.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and that can be an interesting way of doing your background as well.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, the soldier background. So say you've got the soldier background, and you're sick of killing things.
Yeah. You're kind of done. You're kind of done with, or maybe you're just done with taking orders from people.
Orders.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're chaotic good soldier, and for God's sake, just let me do my damn job.
Yeah. That reminds me of a movie I just watched, actually.
Really?
21 Bridge.
Okay.
With God, I can't remember his name now. The guy that was Black Panther. Fuck.
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick, that's the guy. Yep, Chadwick, and he was essentially a chaotic good detective. Where like he just wanted to get the truth, but he had to like play by the rules specifically so that he could do that. But it was kind of very much a like, don't tell me how to do my job. I'm going to do my job the way it's supposed to be done, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my job the best way I know to get the truth out of everything. Like,
I annoy the hell out of Shell doing that. She likes watching her cop shows, and my inner lawyer comes in, and they'll do things like they'll just kick a door in or barge in, and they'll get evidence. And I'm sitting there going, "Well, there goes that evidence. They don't have a warrant. He's getting out of jail." Like, it's not the story. That's not how the story works.
No, but you know what's funny is like, I feel like it's not how the story works, but it's probably how a lot of it works in real life anyway. like
they. No, it really doesn't. Like the police actually do need a good reason. I think there was one where they turned up and there was this like sounded like a guy was being tortured, and they broke in and it was a lady doing porn.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, you know what? Anything they found then is probably admissible. They had good reason. They thought somebody was in danger to break in.
Exactly. Yeah.
But generally, when they do that, I think I hear a yell. No, it doesn't work that way.
Well,
you kind of got to prove that you had that accident circumstance when you're the police.
Yeah, and it then becomes an issue of like how many people are corroborating the same story. Yeah. And
the amount of times I've been sitting here, and I know the police actually do this one. If you talk now, we'll have a word with the DA, and I'm sitting there yelling at the TV, "Don't do it! Keep your mouth shut!"
Yeah, don't say anything without
don't say
present.
anything. They've got to prove you did it. You don't have to prove you're innocent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah.
Okay, and the police don't tell you. The police don't tell you. The police don't tell you that you absolutely do not have to give any information to the police, except generally your name and address.
Yeah.
You've got to supply an identification. But like even little things like the police pull over and go, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" If you go, "Yeah, because I was speeding," well, they've got to, they've got you admitting it. You know?
And if what you should do is just like say nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. But okay, so let's
getting away from my background.
Yes, your background. That's your background. See, that influences the way things go in the story.
Yeah.
That's actually another good point to bring up too. Is like your own personal idea of how your background is tied to your character as well. Because like you said, like you might be a soldier, but you don't want to be like a soldier like you think of a soldier. You might just have been a guerrilla warrior, like, you know, you might have been guerrilla warfare, and that's your sort of soldier background that you want to decide, where it's more sort of it's not really like there was no specialty. You weren't like an officer or infantry or cavalry or anything like that. It's like you might have been like a spy, I want to say, but that's kind of like covered in another background, right?
Well, sometimes it can also be interesting to have a background that doesn't seem to suit. Like, say you're playing a rogue and you are a spy in an army, but you take the soldier background because all the skills you learned had nothing to do with spying.
Yeah, exactly.
You had to fit in with the general, and you know, you're a good spy because the general liked you and you followed him around because you were good at cooking.
Yeah.
Or something as simple as that, you know, or you won a bet and he had to keep you around, so you became a spy. But what did you learn? Well, I learned how to be a soldier.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be fun having figuring out how the background stuff can work in as well. Like if you take a different background to what the class is, like say, go back to Acolyte.
Yeah.
You want to take the Acolyte background, but you want to play a fighter.
Yeah.
You know, so what did you do? Well, I was an Acolyte when I was a kid and didn't like it, so I took up fighting.
Yeah. Or even if you were an Acolyte and instead of following the path of a cleric because you didn't want to spend time in research or you didn't want to spend time like worshipping God, you preferred action by your own hand, that you just, you know, assumed was guided by the divine.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying before, I mean, why were you an Acolyte? Well, my dad was a cleric. My dad was a priest.
Exactly.
He made me help with all the rituals. I know all of that.
Yeah.
But then I became a fighter. What's the first fighting style you take as a fighter? You take the new unarmed fighting style.
Yeah.
Why? Because the entire time I was an Acolyte, I got into fist fights. Eventually, my dad gave up and just let me go out and become a soldier. But your background
is an Acolyte. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could even choose something like sort of like a disassociation with like you're a folk hero and you've saved a bunch of people, but you really didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Like you did it by accident and everyone keeps thanking you and you're just so annoyed that you've got all this like fame that you just you don't want it. Like it's not something that you want, but everybody knows who you are. Like you're
the great hero who did this. Can you help me?
It's like, no,
dude,
I'm
a fucking farmer.
Wasn't me.
I can't do it. No, I can't go and visit today. I've got to go and
pick my potatoes,
milk the cows, pick the potatoes or whatever. It's harvesting season.
Yeah. I love the idea. Is like you're a folk hero retired on this farm, and everyone keeps coming up to you to try and thank you, or like, you know, ask you to do things, and you're like, guys, get off my damn property.
I've been watching YouTube short clips of Letterkenny.
Uh-huh.
And they're farmers, they're the hicks in it, apparently. But the main character in it is always getting into fights, but he doesn't let people come on his property. They've got to fight him at the end of the lane.
Oh, okay.
He like goes out and fight. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, come and fight for us. Dude, fuck off. I got farming to do. I got chores.
Yeah. Or even I just looking down the list. Even imagine you're a hermit, right? But not by choice.
Yeah.
You got lost in the forest somewhere and you've been living there for like 20 years or like even shorter. It could be, like a matter of a year or something like that. And all of a sudden you find your way out.
Yeah. Or you're a hermit.
Oh, and the city starts to get built around you.
No. Because your father was a sage and went to this island in the middle of bumblefuck.
Yeah.
This island in the middle of nowhere and spent like 10 years studying one creature on it.
Yeah. And you're just there by matter of circumstance.
Yeah. Although that would probably be more Outlander than...
Sort of, but like pretty close to Hermit though. Like, I mean, honestly, you could pick Hermit for that as well, to be honest. Like,
You could, except Hermit's more... Well, it gives you medicine and religion.
Yeah, you would have to...
It doesn't seem to fit what I would be looking for. And you get you've discovered some...
Yeah.
Well, I suppose technically it could be your dad's discovery.
Yeah.
But why do you learn medicine and herbalism? Because
that was the only thing.
Dad kept getting beaten up by the animals, and I had to fix him. For God's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. Or I like the idea of like you're a hermit, but the city starts to get built around you.
Yeah.
Right? And like the city starts to get closer and closer, and all of a sudden it's like, well, fuck, the town's only like a 5-minute walk away now. It used to be like a 3-day journey. Yeah. And now it's like, okay, well, I guess I can't really avoid being like not being a hermit anymore. I have to get out of here. I have to go and like, like interact with people again. Or even like you said, like the Outlander one, like it could be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Outlander one is a great one. But you don't necessarily have to live in it. You don't have to be a tribesman to have Outlander.
No.
You could be like that guy that keeps turning up in World of Warcraft, the hunter.
Yeah.
What's his name? Every new area you go to. Huh?
Rexar?
No, Nessing Thwaite or whatever his name is.
Nessingware, yeah. Hammett Nessingware. Yeah.
No, not the hermit.
No, Hammett. His name's Hammett. Yeah, he's the dwarf,
Hammett,
right?
Yeah, Hammett.
Yeah, he's like a monster hunter kind of guy.
Yeah, you could be like him. You could be a guide that keeps taking people out into these weird, wonderful places. Yeah. And it actually explains everything in Outlander. Athletics and survival, well, you're an outdoorsman. Why wouldn't you have it?
Yeah.
Musical instrument, you've got to keep the people entertained.
Yeah.
Another language, because when you're out there dealing with the orcs, it's nice to be able to talk to them.
Yeah, so it's not Outlander then. It's realistically like Safari tour guide.
Yeah, so... that's what your Outlander thing is. You're not really that. Oh, and I love living in the wilderness. Well, no, fuck that. I'd much rather be in a. I'd much rather be in an inn,
getting drunk
in an inn with food and a bed.
Yeah. But that's just my profession.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also I feel like,
and then you get the interesting interaction of where do you take that class? Like,
yeah.
Are you a rogue because you sneak around and hunt things? Are you a ranger? You know, it could be really interesting if you're a warlock, to try and explain that into it as well.
Yeah.
Maybe you made a deal with somebody that you met when you were.
Well, one safari could have gone bad, and while you're out
how the fuck did I end up in the Feywild?
Yeah. And it's like all of a sudden you've got an Archfey patron, or even if you took someone out and like something happened and you died and you become a patron to undead, to an undead creature.
Or for God's sake, how did those things manage to summon a real demon?
Yeah.
If you let me live,
I'll bring you more people.
Yeah.
I'm a tour guide, don't you know? Yeah.
I think we just made up a villain NPC.
We totally did, honestly.
That's not a player character. It'd be interesting. You keep meeting this guy. I'm a guide. Why do the people never come back?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's tons of ways to like have that juxtaposition between like your background not actually being exactly what it is, compared to what you're doing in the present in the present of the adventure. Like even for sailor, like you were a sailor but you quit because you literally got seasick every single time you were on a boat, or like or it could have been like you're a sailor and you got into a shipwreck and now you have post-traumatic stress about it and you literally just can't go on the boat anymore. Like there's tons of things you could do.
If I have to eat one more bloody fish,
there's tons
someone's
of things.
Gonna pay with their life.
There's tons of things you could do for that. And then also, so there's ones in the Acquisitions Incorporated which are a little bit different to the other player backgrounds. They're a little bit more quirky, I think, like a Celebrity Adventurer's Scion, or like, what's another one? The Gambler, even. Like, those are ones that are kind of a little bit more tied to like real-worldy sort of stuff. But like that's kind of how Acquisitions Incorporated is as an entire sort of what do you call it, brand, I suppose. It's very like fun and interesting and quirky and kind of that sort of stuff for that. But I like the Failed Merchant. That's pretty funny. I like this idea of like a door-to-door knife salesman who never sold anything, but he still calls himself a door-to-door knife salesman. Like, just like, interesting stuff like that.
Door-to-door knife salesman.
What else we got? The background. So from Thurs, the specific one that they have is the athlete, right? So you get the athlete. You get the athlete background, which is, you know, very sort of a Greek mythology sort of thing. But I really like from here the supernatural gifts that you have for Thurs, which are not really backgrounds, but they're like extra things that you gain on top of your character, which is, it's more specific to our game because we have these, but essentially it's like you've got your character, you've got your class, you've got your background, but you've also got like something else that you gained because you are a chosen of the god, essentially. And this is something that, like, I wouldn't put in every single game that you play, but it's an interesting way to tie in another homebrew rule, which I like doing a lot, which is giving every character a level 1 feat. I really like having characters at level 1 get a feat for free, because it gives you like something specific that you can kind of really kind of like tie into how your character acts, and not just in combat, but like in general. Like taking the chef's feat, it's like a huge thing. You could, you know, you are a cook. That's what you do for the group all the time. Or taking the healer feat at level 1, it's like you might be a fighter. You don't have any ability to heal anybody, but like maybe you took the healer soldier background, and that's the reason you also want to take the healer feat. Or maybe you're a fighter and you've seen a lot of wounds and you know how to fix them up, at least to the point where that person's not going to die. So you take the healer feat and now you can heal a little bit. Or even something as simple as like the linguist feat. If you come from a large city, maybe your background was as a noble or something like that, and you are a wizard, and you're just like, well, I'm a noble wizard. I probably would have known a shitload of different people, had a lot of different connections, studied a lot. I probably know 3 different languages on top of the languages I already start with. Like, there's lots of different things that you can kind of tie into little pieces. Yeah, little pieces that kind of like really kind of pull the entire character together. And I feel like for Thurs, it's having that thing that you get from the god, because that allows your character to kind of stand out in a specific way. But like for other homebrew games, having a feat at level 1 as a homebrew rule, it can be a little bit game breaking if you give it to people that want to power play it. But honestly, if you just talk to your players beforehand, say like, look guys, I want you to pick something that kind of like gives your character more depth, then, you know, discuss with them like how and why, the reasons how they decide to choose or why they decide to choose what they choose, and you go through it with them, and you just kind of be like, well, what if you chose it? Maybe give some suggestions, and try and tie it in a little bit to the character's background, or just what they want the character to be, maybe as well. Then that can be a good kind of extra little thing to give the players. So yes. Speaking of homebrewing. Now, I can't ever remember the specific rules for homebrewing your own background. I think it's in the DMG.
It might be in the DMG.
Yeah, it's right here. Customizing a background. Okay. So you might want to tweak some features that fit your character better for a campaign setting. Customize, you can replace one feature with any other, choose any 2 skills, and choose a total number of 2 total of 2 tool proficiencies or languages from sample backgrounds. You can either use the equipment package from your background or spend coin as described in Chapter 5, which is where you basically choose starting equipment. And finally, choose 2 personality traits and ideal bottom of the floor. If you can't find a feature that matches your background, work with the DM, create one. Yeah. So you can switch like a skill for another skill, or even both the skills. You can change a tool proficiency for another tool proficiency, or a language for another language, or you might switch a tool proficiency out for a language if you think you wouldn't have a tool proficiency, depending on what kind of background you're trying to create. So yeah, I mean, it's essentially like you've got a feature which, you'll notice on things like the Entertainer. The Entertainer's feature is by popular demand. So you can always find a place to perform. This is the part of the background that isn't like it's not like a rule. It's like a thing that you might want to draw on to role play with. Yeah, and it's something that you and your DM need to agree on. The ones in the book are there because they've probably been play tested a bunch of times, and these make sense to the background. So if you're gonna homebrew a background, this is the thing that you need to focus on more than the tool proficiencies and the languages and stuff. Because languages and stuff, like, you can ask your DM, hey, can I take Draconic instead of this because I lived in a place where there was lots of Dragonborn, and they I had a lot of Dragonborn friends when I was growing up, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. But if it's something, even if it's something like I want to switch out religion for history because I was more interested in the history than I was about religion, like, yeah, that's fine, right? Something like by popular demand, or even the folk hero one, which is like rustic hospitality. So whenever you go somewhere, you can always find somewhere to rest among commoners. Like someone will invite you into their house and let you stay there or whatever. Like that is the real thing that you kind of want to talk about more with your DM than anything else when you're trying to homebrew some kind of background, because that little feature is something that you can really play off of for your background. It kind of gives you that. It's a feat, right? It's basically what it is. It's not as strong as the feats on the feats page, but it's an interesting little thing that you can pull into work for role playing. Sailor one, ship's passage. When you need to, you can get a free passage on a sailing ship for yourself and your adventuring companions, because you're calling in a favor, or something like, or you've got good relations with someone. The urchin one, city streets, how city streets work. The Outlander one is like you can't get lost or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Excellent memory for maps and geography. You can always find fresh food and water for yourself and up to 5 people each day, provided the land has small berries, game, water, and so forth. So, like, all these things are like tiny little parts of the background that really call into your character's strengths in what they used to do before they started adventuring.
Yeah.
Which is super handy to have, honestly, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm a fighter. It's like, cool, do you know how to look for food? No. Okay, where are we? We're in the middle of the forest. There's berries and shit everywhere. Do you know which ones to eat? No. Like, having someone who's an Outlander would just be like, oh yeah, those are edible. Yeah, we can get water from down the creek down there. I can filter it. It's fine. Like, we know how to, like, that character immediately, doesn't matter what their class is, simply from their background, they're going to be able to survive better than that fighter can. So having those tiny little things from your background, although they seem fairly insignificant, can help a lot in the not so much in the game mechanics, although it does help in the game mechanics too, but more so in the roleplay side of things, of having extra little things that you can kind of have your character do to show what your character is capable of and who they are as a person, and kind of allows you to kind of really push forward that stuff. So I have not done any background homebrewing at all, because I think
I did with Mark.
I think maybe once or twice someone's gone, and it might have been, you might have done it once, John, as well. I don't really remember, but it was probably ages ago. Whereas, like, can I switch this for this because I think this suits the character better? I'm like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
like that's about it.
I made up a background with Mark Surgeon.
Oh yeah,
so
that's
not
right.
A healer.
Yeah, that's right. I remember.
And he had, I think I made up the background thing, like the was surgeon acceptance. A surgeon is normally welcomed by nobles and community leaders. They can always find moderate lifestyle, and they can usually purchase healers kits and potions of healing at half cost.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Which I thought, as a background, that was pretty cool. And I think he got
that was the one where he got the retainers that were like his assistants or whatever, right?
Yeah, but that didn't have anything to do with the background.
No. But that was just that's the same character.
Same character.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think he got medicine and something.
Yeah, medicine. And
I don't think it was much different to the hermit or something. Like, we based it on one of the other ones.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't get the healer's kit as a.
I think you gave it to him, didn't
tool
you?
Proficiency. Probably. Yeah, I'm just looking at his character sheet and he hasn't got it on there, but he probably has it. Maybe he didn't write it down because he doesn't really need it. He's a who's the halfling with the marker healing.
That's right.
He had spells to do it.
Yeah, that was.
Which is kind of cool. It was fun to do it.
Was that character is that character like a wizard? Isn't it?
Yeah, he was like a 12th level Order of the Scribe wizard.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So mostly blowing shit up, but then he had cure wounds.
But he had the ability to cast the healing spells because he knew them as a halfling. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that character now. Yeah.
So it's pretty. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was fun doing it to make up the and like I said, if you compare the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide to the Player's Handbook, a lot of them, there's not much difference between a mercenary veteran and a soldier.
No, but there's like those.
But there's enough difference.
There's enough that you could change them. Yeah. So like, I'm just looking now at Van Richten's, and it only has 2 backgrounds. It's got a general backgrounds feature, with like Inheritor, Mist Wanderer, Spirit Medium, Trauma Survivor, and Traveler, where it's got like, they're kind of, they're all sort of like different characteristics that you can put on your character but not like specifically a background. But there are like the Haunted one is a background specifically, and this one gives you a lot of choices from your skill proficiencies, rather than most of the time background just gives you 2 proficiencies. These are the ones you get. This one actually gets you 2 from 4, so Arcana, Investigation, Religion, or Survival, and then you can also choose 2 languages from another list of languages, and then you get equipment where you actually get like a whole Monster Hunter pack, which is pretty nuts. But you have a harrowing event, which is pretty interesting. And you also got the feature, the Heart of Darkness. So commoners tend to fear you. Although they will extend every courtesy to you and do their utmost to help you, which is kind of interesting. And then you got the Investigator, which I think is a really cool background because it is sort of better than the one from the Player's Handbook, which is the shit, what's it called? I closed the Player's Handbook one. Not like the spy. Isn't there another one? God, I can't remember now.
Criminal.
Like a not a detective, but like a
entertainer.
I think it's like a variant.
Guild artisan.
A variant of I want to say like.
You're not thinking Soul Case of Interest card.
I might be. Investigator, something similar to an investigator.
Faction agent.
Yeah, maybe that was.
Far traveler. No, that's not it. Inheritor. Knight. I think it's bounty hunter. Urban bounty hunter.
That's probably the closest one to it.
Gives you ear to the ground background. You're in frequent contact with people in the segment of society that your chosen quarry moves for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this one. Official inquiry. You experience that gaining access to people and places to get information you need through a combination of fast talking, determination, and official looking documentation. You can gain access to a place or an individual related to a crime you're investigating. Those who aren't involved in your investigation avoid impeding you or pass along your requests. Additionally, local law enforcement has firm opinions about you, viewing you as either a nuisance or one of their own. So, if your documentation is official looking enough, then perhaps the local law enforcement will be like, oh, yeah, we'll help them as much as we can. Or if it's kind of dodgy and they're just like, that fucker's poking their nose around again, god damn it.
It's the Agatha Christie background.
Yeah.
You're either Hercule Poirot.
Yeah.
Or Miss Marple.
Yeah, it's one or the other. But I like this path to mystery thing that they have, right? Because this gives you like this was the first case that you're ever on, and like it kind of lingers on your mind, I suppose, because it's got like a friend was wrongfully accused of murder. You track down the actual killer, proving your friend's innocence, and stating your career as a detective, and starting your career as a detective. So, but what if later on, during the adventure somewhere, you find a clue that shows that your friend was actually the murderer? Or that the actual killer that you tracked down and proved and proving your friend's innocence was not the actual killer, and you were just so hell-bent on saving your friend that you convicted someone else who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then like something else. What if you did and they escaped?
But his family's coming back anyway.
Yeah, or they escaped from prison or something. Like like you don't know.
I proved this guy was the murderer. What's his name? Duke Ferdinand.
Yeah.
Needless to say, he's not locked up, and I'm leaving town really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, here's another one. You're told you went missing for weeks. When you were found, you had no memory of being gone, and now you search to discover what happened to you. That's like an entire adventure there, like trying to figure out what the fuck happened when you had no memory. You run into people that keep recognizing you. You don't know who they are or where they're from. And then you make eye contact with someone across a bar. That person gets up and leaves the bar and starts running, and you have no idea why or where they're going. But of course, you're going to chase them, because why would they run away from you just from looking at you for some reason? So, like, there's tons of options for that sort of stuff there too, which is pulling a story from a background. Is pretty essential, again, to like tying in the characters more in depth to the adventure that you're trying to write and create. It can be difficult to tie in it can be difficult to tie in more than one character into the same story. Of a background, unless you're pretty good at sort of fumbling your way, not fumbling, but like kind of like really trying to leave clues that are obvious enough that the players can understand and pick up on, and having them make sense. Because it's not always easy to tie a plot together if you have to leave very enigmatic clues, like, because players will just either like not even be paying attention, or they or they'll like go like, "Huh, that seems interesting," and then the second piece of the clue that'll come up that ties it together, they'll look at it and be like, "Oh, that's interesting," and they won't actually put two and two together. Like unless you really like give a big hint. Like, okay, so there's an example of this, bit of a spoiler in the Witchlight thing that you guys have already completed, so it's not spoiler for you guys. But the unicorns on the carousel that you repaint the names on, when you repaint the names on and you get the names right, they give you a bunch of information, right? And you guys did that. You got it. But when I first started, and I was like, this is going to be easy. They're going to get it like straight away. And it was like a couple of minutes and you're like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, like, I think Mark got like maybe a hint of one of them, and then John, you got a hint of another one, and then it was all of a sudden it was like, oh, we get the entire thing now. It was like fortune favors the bold, and like and the moss doesn't grow on the stone.
We ummed and ahmed for about 10 minutes, and then in 30 seconds got all of them.
Yeah, exactly. They were just simple little like and it was like, I felt like, oh, you guys are gonna figure this out straight a fucking way. But it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And the thing is, that kind of happens to me regularly as a DM, is like, I always think like, oh, this is going to be easy. And then you guys don't really pick up on it. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's easy for me because I already know the answer and I already know all the clues and I already know what's happening here. But I need to paint a better word picture for you guys so you can understand without giving it away. And that's a very difficult thing to do sometimes. It takes a lot of practice.
How often do you have the...
Sorry, you're cutting out a little bit there.
So, how often do you have the opposite happen, where you think you've got something that's going to be really hard to figure out, and the players do it in about 30 seconds?
About 30 seconds? Yeah, that happens too. Yeah, that happens too. Yeah.
I remember I ran there was a horror game. You were playing psychics and monsters were coming out and fighting with you and stuff like that. And I made up an adventure for it. And I thought, this is going to be really hard. They're not going to get this.
Yeah.
And as a joke, one of the players just made up what he thought was the craziest idea ever.
Yeah.
And ran through it. And I was very quiet, and everybody got shut up and looked at me, and they said, "He got it, didn't he?" I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah. Yeah, it can be difficult to create.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun though. It is fun. Like it can be difficult to create things that players will either. It's hard to gauge how quickly players are going to pick up on like clues and puzzles and things like that, because it like they might be overthinking it, or they might be like thinking about it in a completely wrong way that is just not going to get them anywhere. So sometimes it's better to have a puzzle that is a little bit open-ended, and you can kind of like let them figure it out, and it'll work out like sort of no matter what. So if you're really good at that sort of stuff, then tying like two backgrounds with two different kind of like storylines in together is probably not that difficult for you. But I am not that good at it because
I guess the other thing is, it depends on how do you make up the character. Like if we all turn up to session 0 and we go, you know what? Let's be a bunch of friends that all grew up in the same village.
Yeah, that's true.
Then your backgrounds are then all linked.
Yes.
Anything that happens to that village is affecting all of us. Even if we have like different backgrounds, like one of us could have the Arclight background because his father was the priest, and other one's got Outlander background because their farm was a bit further away and they hardly ever came into town and stuff like that. Like it can be different on paper, but if you all grow up in the same place, you all have that linked background. But you've got to be together as players. Yeah. You know?
If you all have like a mutual understanding of the past for what has happened in your and how your characters know each other and how they interacted before the story that you're on, before the adventure that you're on rather, then they have a shared sort of knowledge of what's happened, and so that in itself can intertwine your characters a lot more easily, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that that I would like to try and do more, but it's difficult to do because
it's really hard to do because
it's hard to do when
I've wanted to have session zeros where you turn up and as the DM goes, this is what I want. But what you tend to have in session zeros is you turn up and one of us goes, I want to play the fighter, and someone else goes, oh, I'll play the cleric, I'll do this, and I want to play this. And we all turn up with ideas what we want to play at the start, rather than saying, let's wait to see what
to see what kind of story, kind of what story you want to play.
And sometimes it doesn't matter. Like when we're doing hunter things, it really doesn't matter because the idea is just to have fun for an hour. But in other things, I mean, you could be having a camp, like you could be running a campaign and you go, this is what I want in said campaign. You know.
I with the Thurs campaign that we're doing, like I'm really enjoying it because it gives me a lot of freedom to create stories in sort of any direction. It's not like I don't feel limited, even though the world is not that big. Thurs is not huge, but it's not. I still don't feel limited by the kind of direction that the story can take, and I don't know whether that was. I don't know whether that was just luck, or whether that was like a good decision I made early on in a campaign.
I think it's
or whether it was like whether it was sort of like a just what do you call it, like a matter of circumstance too, where like where everybody decided what they wanted to play, and because I said like don't feel limited, like nobody has to play a healer or a fighter or whatever, like you guys can play whatever you want and don't worry, it'll work out. Like I'll sort out the combats so that it might be more dangerous because you don't have a healer, but it will not be like every single fight will not be lethal. It is just it just mean you've got to have more tactical a more tactical thought process when you get into an encounter, which so far has been awesome, to be honest. I feel like there've been a lot of encounters where you guys have come close and a couple of people have been knocked unconscious, but you get back up and keep going and manage to swing the fight in your favor.
It also helps that it's far from our first game.
You're not all new players.
We might not have a healer, but we've got at least two characters that can.
Exactly.
I mean,
but you're tying the backgrounds into that is like,
I think
it hasn't been difficult because everything that you're doing and everything that everyone's kind of set forward so far in terms of like how they've decided to create their characters and their backstories has been has made it easy for me to come up with something that I could tie into the world really easily.
Yeah, it's good if you've got players that can make nice open-ended decisions. On the backwards. Leave something for the DM. Don't finish everything off if you're telling a story. Don't finish the story. What you're doing. You're telling the beginning. I think what you were saying before about being open-ended, that's the joy of playing a role-playing game rather than a video game.
And I think it's the joy of playing a homebrew game too, to be honest.
But I mean, you could start with, like, we could have gone off in some weird direction with Frank the Clerk. I mean, once we'd finished the not homebrew adventure, we could have gone off in other directions with them. And the world is open to us. We could have gone anywhere we wanted. But I think that's in the nature of the thing is like when you're talking about what we're talking about before, I said it's the background is how your characters begin. It's the bedrock of what they are. It can also be like that for adventures. Like when you start the adventure, how do you start an adventure? Well, you pick one character that's got an interesting background and you make up an adventure with that character. He drags the rest of the players into it. You've then got 3, 4, whatever other backgrounds
characters. Exactly.
Or you just go off in a completely different direction. Like something happens halfway through that first adventure, the next thing you know, you're in another town saving the world and scratching your head going, how did we get here?
Exactly. Like, no, you don't have to always have the story tie into a background for sure to get the players invested, but it's a good way.
If you're doing, especially if you're doing homebrew,
Yeah.
Like,
if you're doing homebrew, it's a good way to start. You need to start for an adventure.
Yeah.
You know?
And I find like it's a good way to tie in at least one of the players very early on to the story, and it gets the rest of the players interested to find out what that character is about as well. Like, it's not always super interesting or anything like that, but it's a good way to kind of start the campaign out. So, like, for example, we did the Melitus Games, so the Olympic Games essentially. But before that, we did start out with a very small adventure where you guys went out on a boat, found an island, found a crab battle, and then came back again. And as soon as you came back, it was time for the Olympic Games. And then once you were back, Caius heard that their brother was here or something very early on, and it was like, what? And then the whole, like, you know, Caius's background kind of came with a lot of, it wasn't like overly complicated, but it was like, oh, we need to help your brother track down these monsters. And it was like, okay, so you kind of get an idea of the relationship that Caius had with his brother, very competitive, and all that sort of stuff. And then after that, it kind of quickly turned to a story about Victus's family that you were not all aware of at all until like it just kind of like jumped you. But Victus was aware of that the whole time, that they were going towards Setessa. He was aware that this was that he's gonna have to meet his family. He's gonna have to, like, at least, you know, stop in and say, like, look, I'm okay, I'm doing all right, I'll be back when I can. But you guys didn't know that for the longest time. You just thought you were going there to help out Setessa and get rid of the things that were attacking the city. And so, like, having that kind of what would you call it? Like the different kind of level of I don't know if enthusiasm is the right word, but the different kind of like mindset, I suppose, just going into that situation for the players as well as the characters. I think, to me, at least as a DM, is really interesting, because I was messaging Mark back and forth, asking him more about his family as you guys were getting closer to Setessa, so that I could try and incorporate more of them into the story a little bit. And same thing, I guess, now with you, John, when I kind of asked you, like, what sort of backstory does Conan have, because I would like to put more of his, you know, his history into the game, and you gave me a really cool little story, and I'm like, okay, I can play off tons of this stuff for a story arc at some point. It just lets me have, like, that little bit of extra information that will be really fun and interesting for you when it comes up, because you'll be like, oh yes, I know what this is, and no one else will have any idea until Conan kind of speaks up and decides to tell everyone what's going on. Which I think is really cool to have. I think it's really cool to have for a character. And we have not seen the last of Gaius, for sure. He's going to come back at some point, at least, you know, just to make sure Caius is doing okay, because, you know, he's a twin brother, but he's the older twin brother, so he's sort of protective and, you know, competitive too at the same time. So of course he's going to check in on Caius and see how they're doing.
Yeah, I've had so many characters named Gaius, but mostly dwarves.
Yeah.
I think way back, one of my very first character was Gaius the Red, and I took his name because Gaius is actually Julius Caesar's name.
Yes.
And I think I've done a couple of characters before, all who are named Gaius, and in my head they're related.
Yeah.
Like it was Gaius the Second, kind of, and Gaius the Third. Every time you talk about Gaius, that's what floats through my head.
Yeah. Well, this one's a centaur ranger, so I don't know how that's going to be related, but maybe
no, they're not. He's not.
maybe some kind of like multi-dimensional version of Gaius, perhaps.
Yeah,
because there's no dwarves in Thurs, so, you know, maybe that's
No.
The version of dwarf for this setting.
Yeah, that's weird that they're so limited.
Yeah, I mean,
especially kind of after that, 5th edition took off it almost seems like they're trying to
diversify as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a whole different podcast.
Well, I think it's just the it is.
Actually, you know what? For all we've talked about background and everything like that, I think race can be an important part of your background.
Race can, but race is a whole
depending on the homebrew.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of, like, if you're playing in something like a Lord of the Rings type one, race is almost as important as
it does determine. It really depends on the setting, I think, because like you said, like it determines a lot of your kind of personality behavior in terms of like the environment that you grew up in.
Yeah.
So
it really can. Like, I mean,
yeah.
It's run right through role playing games. I can see why they're going away for. Like, I've played a lot of different mechanical role-playing games, like the Palladium ones, Rollmaster. I've played quite a few of them, and in them, race can be very important. Like, I know in Rollmaster, even what skills you have when you start,
it's kind of based
partly on race. But if you're playing an elf, you can shoot a bow, kind of thing. I can see why they try and get away with that. But on the other hand, that should also depend a bit on the setting you're in.
Yeah,
like it's very possible to play a setting where the elves literally all live here, and 90% of you people there are elves. The dwarves live there, and 90% of the people there are dwarves.
Yeah.
So part of your background is, I'm a dwarf. Well, if you're a dwarf, then we know what you are, kind of.
Yeah. I've got a whole. Actually, one of the other podcasts is talking about races and that sort of stuff as well. But it does. That can influence your background for sure. Because if you want to, I think the race background combination sort of does become more apparent when you are talking about the setting for sure. I think the setting kind of like gives more influence on the flavor of the background to do with race. I think it's not such a huge deal in a homebrew game where everything's available. You can play whatever you want. Like, which race you play then doesn't have to have a huge influence on your background or your backstory. But depending on the,
I think
like even in
it kind of gets back to what I was saying before too, though, about the setting one. When you do session 0. When you do session 0, the very first thing you should be talking about is not what kind of players you want to be. The very first thing you should say is, okay, as the DM, this is the setting we're using. This is what it's like. The characters have to fit in with that setting first. If you say, like you said, hey, I only use the races out of Thurs, well, immediately I knew I wasn't playing a dwarf, I was playing an elf and stuff like that. You know, it really does, when you're talking about backgrounds even, you've got to start with that setting.
I think
if you start a game and say we want a rural setting, well, I'm not playing an urban investigator, am I?
No. Yeah, that's true. I think the setting does have a lot of influence on the character that you might decide to play at the start of a campaign, because it kind of lets you. I mean, creative freedom is one thing, but you need barriers on that freedom too, right? So, like, you've got the creative freedom to choose any race class combination you want within this sort of like bucket of options, and within that bucket there aren't any dwarfs. It's like, okay, why aren't there any dwarfs? Because the place you're all going to be adventuring in, there's no dwarves there. There's no halflings. They don't exist in this world. That's just the way it is. And like, that's not the DM being a dick. That's the DM being like, this world doesn't have those things in it.
Because I mean, and I like that, because I like Thurs where you said that and you came and did that. I also like the homebrew setting I did, where to be different. I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted every option to be in there.
Yes.
You know, if I play a Dwarven Samurai, go for it. There's a way to do it.
Yeah. I like that too. Yeah.
Very fun ways of doing it. What do you reckon, Evan? Is he still with us?
Evan, are you there?
Yeah. What about me?
What about you?
I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah.
I talk too much.
I just haven't had anything to add at the moment. That's all.
All right.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so I think like for the setting stuff, like
I might have to call it.
Yeah. All right, man.
Because I might jump off.
Yep. No worries, dude.
All right, dude.
Okay.
Take it
Have
easy.
fun.
Talk to you next
again
time.
soon.
All right.
I really enjoyed it though.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Bye.
Bye. I think just to kind of, I guess, wrap it up, because we've been talking for a little bit. Everything can impact your background and your backstory, from what race you are, what the setting is, what class you want to choose.
Take inspiration from things as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you've read another RPG, like Cyberpunk or Starfinder or Pathfinder, if you like a background that's in that, take inspiration from it and see what you can do when you're customizing.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, is like don't just look at 5e Dungeons and Dragons for what backgrounds exist, and then choosing from those. Like the homebrew customizing your background is very much open to, like, any role-playing game. If you've got a background that exists in a game that you really, really like, pinch it and just adjust it to 5e rule setting, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much more to say about backgrounds other than, like, I really enjoy trying to tie them into the story for a homebrew setting. It's difficult as hell to do it in a module, because, like, modules are already like pretty restricted in terms of like what you want to try and get through, but it kind of depends on the module a little bit. I know in some modules there is room, like the Tomb of Annihilation, the one where you go around all of Chultan stuff. Like, there's room in that story where you could weave characters' backgrounds in, but their backgrounds would have to be specifically about things within the setting. But
like archaeologists,
and I think exactly.
There's another one there as well.
Yeah, there is. There's a couple
fit really well into it.
Those ones would be ones that you would want to sit down with your players at session 0 and talk to them about, and say, like, look, guys, this is a huge kind of sandboxy sort of type adventure module. I want to throw your backgrounds in there. Let's create some backgrounds for your characters that kind of relate to the reasons that you're in Chult to begin with. If you did that at session 0 and you guys made a cool little story, it doesn't matter if you keep that stuff secret from the other players and it's just between the DM and the one specific, like, each player, then I think you could tie backgrounds into that. And it wouldn't even have to be huge. It could be something tiny, like one of the sessions you find something that one of the characters was looking for as part of their background, and then, maybe that one thing that they were looking for is actually already tied into the main storyline, or it's not tied into the main storyline, but there's like a section or an area of the adventure that you want them to travel to. Then you can kind of throw them a bit of a, not a red herring, so to speak, but like a clue that gets them in the wrong direction for the main story, but in the right direction for the backstory adventure. There's tons of ways to do that in that sort of story. I think. What's the other one? Storm of the Frost Giants? Is that the one?
Yes.
That adventure too has for sure has some area in it that I know. Storm King's Thunder, that's the one. Storm King's Thunder. I know for a fact that one has an area where there's some places that you can go and explore. Because you kind of have to. From all I've heard about that adventure is, like, very much like you get from this level to this level, and then to get to the next area you have to be a certain level because it's apparently too difficult. So you've got to actually go and do a bunch of side quests to go in to, like, essentially level up to get to the main storyline again. So, like, that's an area where you could throw in players' backgrounds, but again, at session 0 you'd have to very much, like, let the players know like more about the setting so that they could have a better idea of how to create a background or a backstory that would fit in to that setting, so that you could create a small storyline there for them to play through to then move on to the next section of the story. So I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more adventures like that have stuff in it, that have like an area where you essentially get to roam around a little bit and have a bit of a sandbox type experience. And even if there's not, and you have a good way to tie it in, you can always put that stuff in an adventure anyway. I know for a fact that for the Witchlight game, that at least one of my characters has a background about being Fae-ish. So like, that's a whole thing I could throw into that adventure module somewhere. But honestly, the story for Witchlight is like fun enough as it is, that I don't think we're going to have a point where there's going to be like downtime where the characters aren't going to be engaged in the story already.
Yeah, so far it's been really engaging.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Like, it's really interesting. And there's tons of like fun little stuff to do like all over the place in that adventure, which is really, really cool. So that's it for backgrounds and backstories. I mean, we didn't really talk much about backstory specifically, but I think we got the point, which was don't let the most interesting thing have already happened to your character. Have the start of your character's story kind of like outlined for the DM and maybe for the other players, so they know what has happened, but don't let the most interesting thing have happened yet. I think that's kind of the main thing for the backstory. Doesn't need to be huge. Your backstory doesn't need to be huge. It only needs to get bigger when your DM asks for more information. Honestly, like, if you're like, oh, I'm from this town, I've got a brother, he ran away when I was little, haven't seen him in 10 years, my mum died of grief, my dad drank himself to death, boom. And then I was like, I left home and I became a wizard.
Soldier.
Or yeah, a soldier. Yeah, anything. Yeah, or it doesn't really matter. It's like I left home, became an actor, and then after becoming an actor, I realized that I was more interested in learning about history than I was about acting. So I became a scholar and then a wizard, or whatever it ended up being. That's a bunch of stuff that happened. Your brother ran away. Your mum died of grief. Okay, she's a ghost now. She haunts your house. Your dad drank himself to death. Like guilt and resentment towards him somehow. And then you find out later on that he didn't actually drink himself to death. He was stressed out and working an extra job, and he gave all this money to your brother who didn't really run away. He left home, and the dad found out it was because he had a curse or something on him. And you could just extrapolate a backstory into any kind of interesting adventure if you just throw a twist in there, he was cursed, or there's tons of different things you can do. Anyway, don't let me ramble on any longer, because I will not shut up. But that's
end the podcast.
But that's backgrounds. So bye. End of podcast. Cut it.